If you were to wander the halls of any major gallery, no one is going to argue that a piece by Picasso, Renoir, Pissarro, or Dali aren't actually art. But what about this? Or this? What if I told you that this piece was generated by artificial intelligence? What if I went one further and told you I had entered it into a competition? Well, this is exactly what James M. Allen did in August of 2022. Now, I'm going to butcher the name, but his piece, Theatre de Opera Special, took first place in the digital arts category of the Colorado State Fine Arts Fair. As you might imagine, this spurred some pretty big debates online about what it means to be an artist. In my opinion, the piece is actually pretty cool, and he was open about the fact that he used the program Midjourney to generate it. But fast forward to March of 2023, and Boris Eldagson's, whatever. Fast forward to March of 2023, and Boris Eldagson's piece, Pseudomnesia, took first place at the Sony World Photography Awards. Now, unlike James's piece, the organisers of the competition were completely unaware that Boris had used artificial intelligence to generate his artwork. Now, to his credit, Boris turned down the award immediately. Rather, his intention had been to see if these large competitions were in fact ready for AI-generated artwork, and it would appear that they were not.
And my mission was to create awareness for that we need to keep this in mind in the photo community, that it is going to happen. It's going to happen on a much, much larger scale in the future.
AI programs are built by a process called machine learning. By feeding large amounts of data into an algorithm, this algorithm can be developed to achieve a particular task. Every time the algorithm gets an answer correct, it's rewarded, and every time it gets an answer wrong, it is then adjusted. Ultimately, this allows the machine to identify patterns in data and then produce new content and solutions to problems based off those aforementioned patterns. In the art world, AI programs can be trained on thousands of paintings, images, drawings, etc. to generate new content and new creations based on the inspiration and ideas of those previous works. Now, this begs an interesting question. If I ask an AI algorithm to paint a cityscape in the style of Norman Rockwell, do I own it? Does the developer of the AI program? Or, since this was generated based off Norman Rockwell's own paintings, does he? So, if you were someone who is using any sort of AI platform to generate content, then there are a few things you need to consider in order to avoid infringing copyright and landing yourself in some hot water. In order to establish copyright protection, we must satisfy three conditions. The first is it a type of work that is actually covered by copyright? The second is, does it showcase independent intellectual effort? And finally, is there human authorship involved in the creation of this work? Section 10 of the Copyright Act 1968 covers many different categories of artistic work. They might be a painting, sculpture, drawing, engraving, or photograph. It could be a building, or a model of a building, or any artistic work or craftsmanship that isn't mentioned in those previous paragraphs. Additionally, it doesn't really matter whether it is of artistic quality or not, just that it satisfies one of those criteria. And whilst we might intuitively think that an original work must be inherently novel or creative, that is not the legal test we have here in Australia. To be an original work, the High Court has ruled that there must be only some independent intellectual effort in the creation of that work. Given some liberal interpretation of these rules, it's not much of a stretch to see how AI artwork could in fact become covered under copyright law. Now, in deciding whether the artwork does actually meet a particular threshold, the courts may have to consider the number of words used for an AI prompt, whether other non-AI materials have been used, and whether other programs or methods such as Photoshop have been used in the initial generative phase of the AI output. The last hurdle is probably what is going to be most difficult for AI generative programs to satisfy, and that is that there must be human authorship in order for it to be copyrightable. There was an interesting case in Australia about this, and this was the Telstra Corp versus Phone Directories Company. Essentially, the court decided that in relation to phone books that were written with a computer program, that the threshold for human authorship was not satisfied. Overwhelmingly, the work of compiling the information for the phone book was done by a computer program. And although humans were involved in the collection of data at some point, and they were ultimately in control of the program, they were not shaping or directing the material form themselves. So where does this leave us? As this is an emerging issue, the jury is still very much out. Some online platforms, such as ArtStation, have moved to introducing terms requiring artists to label whether the work was created by an AI, and have provided opt-out systems to prevent their works from being included in AI generative programs. Finally, there are some further questions that will need to be considered, such as whether the creator of the AI program has any copyright claim to the content generated. Conversely, could the user of that AI program, or even the owner of that AI program, be charged with copyright infringement?